Bismillah, walhamdulillah, wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. If you have no idea what I just said, don't worry, you will soon, inshallah. There goes another one. Alright, I'll translate for today. In the name of God, all praise belongs to God, and may peace be upon you and the blessings of God. Welcome to Say What? Islamic Words, Terms, and Phrases. This is the first video in a series of videos that's actually a reboot and an expansion of a video that I did years ago. The goal is to clarify various words, terms, and phrases that Muslims use on a regular basis that you might not understand or that you might just want to understand better. For this first introductory video, I'll very briefly define some very fundamental vocabulary for understanding Islam. I actually did another video a while back on some of these same terms, and I have an ongoing series called What's the Deal with Islam, where I explore some of these topics in more depth. But for today, we're keeping it nice and simple. So without further ado, these are the 7 words I think are the most essential for beginning to understand Islam. Let's start with Islam. Okay, so Islam is the name of the religion, right? But what does it mean? I actually think this is pretty cool because most of the major world religions are isms, or in some cases, anities. They're usually named after individuals or groups, but Islam is actually a word for what you do as a believer and a practitioner of the faith. Islam literally means submission, surrender, devotion, as in submission to the will of God. The idea that a person lives their life not by doing whatever they feel like doing, but rather living their life the way that God would want them to live, making God their first priority in life. I also think this is pretty cool because this is a pretty universal concept, right? Like most religious people, at least those that believe in God, are probably trying to live in accordance with God's will. So in a really broad sense, they're all striving to live Islamically, which leads us to Muslim. Muslim is just the word for someone who practices Islam. For some reason, I've noticed some people have a really hard time with this. Like they'll call Muslims Islamics or call Islam Muslimism or something. I've even been asked, are you Islam or are you Muslim? As if they're two different things. I think people get mixed up because they start with a different letter. So let's keep it simple. In English, when we talk about someone doing an action, we add ER at the end of the word, like worker, helper, submitter. In Arabic, instead of calling someone an the vowels change a bit and you add an M in the front. So someone who does Islam is a Muslim. Simple as that. Actually, it's a little more complicated, but we don't have time for grammar because next up is Allah. So this one's easy. Allah is the Arabic word for God. That's it. If you want to know more about Allah, you can check out some short videos I made from my What's the Deal with Islam series. But suffice it to say that every language has a word for God, and in Arabic, that word is Allah. In Arabic-speaking countries, the word Allah is used for God by people of all faiths. However, outside the Arab world, the word Allah has a strong association with Islam. That's because Muslims, regardless of the language they speak, like to use the Arabic word Allah for God. And that's largely because Arabic was the language spoken by Muhammad. Muhammad, peace be upon him, is the prophet of Islam, or I should say, a prophet of Islam. Muslims believe in many prophets of the past, going all the way back to Adam, peace be upon him. A prophet is someone chosen by God to speak to people on God's behalf. So Muslims see Muhammad, peace be upon him, the way that Christians and especially Jews see Moses, peace be upon him, who, by the way, also happens to be a prophet of Islam. Muslims only worship God, so we don't pray to Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, or see him as a divine figure in any way. He isn't elevated in the way that Christians elevate Jesus, peace be upon him, who, by the way, also happens to be a prophet of Islam. So Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, is definitely not considered to be part of God or the Son of God or anything like that. He is the last prophet and the final messenger sent to humanity, and he was sent with the Quran. The Quran is the holy book for Muslims, and it's understood to be the literal verbatim words of God, the actual speech of Allah, revealed to and recited by the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. The Quran is the primary source of guidance for Muslims, coupled with the Sunnah. The Sunnah means the way or the example of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. He's considered to have been a living example of the Quran in practice. So the Sunnah gives us a real-life example for how to live, how to worship, and how to treat others. If you've ever heard the popular Christian phrase, what would Jesus do? This is basically like that, except what would Muhammad do? Peace be upon both of them. Now, while we can learn about the Sunnah of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, in the Quran, much of what we know of the Sunnah comes from Hadith. Hadiths, or if you want to be technical and use the Arabic plural, a hadith, are narrations of the words and actions of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. They were passed down orally from people who knew him directly, and recorded in Hadith collections that were compiled a few generations after the lifetime of the Prophet, peace be upon him. Now, unlike the Quran, which is seen as the unalterable divine word preserved by God, Hadiths were and are preserved by human efforts, and are therefore understood to be subject to human error. For this reason, each hadith is graded by scholars for its level of authenticity. There are several hadith collections that are commonly seen as the most trustworthy, such as Sahih Bukhari and Sahih Muslim, but none of them reach the level of the Quran, which always comes first as a source of guidance. And there you have it. You now have a handle on some of the most essential and foundational terminology for understanding and discussing Islam. But of course, we're just scratching the surface. And in the rest of this continuous series, we'll learn and examine a variety of words, terms, and phrases so you can increase your Islamic literacy and thereby gain the tools for unlocking Islamic knowledge, inshallah. Don't worry, we'll get to that one eventually. Inshallah. Until then, never stop learning. Peace out.